welcome to the second half of part 2 of my reading journal sketchbook series. That just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? Today I am finishing up the 10-ish books that I started in the first half of the episode. If you haven't the foggiest idea what I'm talking about, you can watch the first ever reading journal video here, and if you have watched number 1, but you haven't watched the first half of this video, I'll link that here as well. Today, I'm just going to be catching up with the other 5. So those are When Among Crows, The Gone World, Where Ivy Dares to Grow, Delicious Monsters, and If We Were Villains. I did leave out a couple of books that I have read recently because they either weren't very good or they weren't very good and also didn't have anything worth drawing. To be honest, a couple of these I really didn't like, and I'm still gonna draw for them, but it's just because they're a little bit more visually inspiring, I guess. Anyways, the plan is to do the remaining 5 and then wrap up this video. But first, a little walk for my mental health, or whatever. After finishing those sketches and refining them a bit, it's time to do some inking. Let's go ahead and get into the reviews. So Delicious Monsters is a book by Lascelles Sambury, and I would classify it as a psychological thriller. It has elements of horror, lots of suspense, and even a little humor sprinkled throughout. The story focuses mainly on 2 teen girls, Daisy and Brittany. Daisy and her mother Grace are looking for a fresh start, but when her mother inherits a secluded mansion in Ontario from her brother-in-law, Daisy has a few questions that her mom isn't exactly willing to answer. Daisy's warned against going into the house, but something isn't right and she has to know what. Meanwhile, 10 years into the future, we hear from Brittany, who's investigating the happenings at the so-called Miracle Mansion that her own abusive mother used for her claim to fame. Next up we have If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio, and if by we the author meant herself, well, I'd have to agree. I know this book is pretty popular and a lot of people love it, but I am not sorry when I say that you will never convince me that this book deserves 5 stars. Every single character is straight up a dumbass. In other words, move over K-Dot, I'm the biggest hater. Moving right on along, we have The Gone World, which is a futuristic sci-fi book that centers around the story of Agent Shannon Moss. Shannon is really just your everyday FBI lady who has been to the future and seen inexplicable things that now haunt her every waking moment. The story follows Moss as she grapples with her own reality while trying to solve a murder that involves time travel and secret government programs. Be sure to read the trigger warnings on this one because there are quite a few elements of horror and a more than sufficient amount of gore. Perhaps one of the more disappointing books that I've read this year is Where Ivy Dares to Grow. Now, this book started out really promising. It basically reminded me of Outlander mixed with Bridgerton. And I mean, you can't really go wrong there, can you? Alas, dear reader, you can. Our story follows Saoirse, a mentally ill woman, in a loveless relationship with a rich, pretty boy who treats her like dirt. Saoirse travels back in time and meets a lovely, handsome man who instantly cures her with his magic British accent and chiseled chest. To sum it up in one word or less, skip! Finally, we have When Among Crows by Veronica Roth, and I'd like to take a moment to talk about why I chose this drawing, which caused me to spend most of my time roughly this close to my journal because I chose to draw fern leaves, which, if you aren't familiar with, are rather detailed and pretty symmetrical. This was a little challenging for me, I'm not gonna lie. I am someone who doesn't like to do super detailed repetitive work, but somewhere along the way I found my groove and it turned out okay. Feel free to read this synopsis while I discuss why I chose this imagery. In the book, one of our main characters, Dimitri, has the fern flower that he believes will help him cure a curse. While doing research on what a fern looks like, I discovered that the actual definition of a fern is a non-flowering plant. So in theory, if this non-flowering plant suddenly put out a bloom, it's safe to assume that flower would be pretty special. And according to the IRL Polish legend that features this flower, it is indeed very special. I don't know about you, but I love books that integrate real lore, and you should read up on it a little more if you're interested. While I can't personally speak for any other Veronica Roth books, I thoroughly enjoyed When Among Crows, and even though it was a little short for my liking, I thought it was a great story. It felt very original, and I really enjoyed the dynamics between the characters. Here's a final look at the 5 pages that I completed. I really hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope that you'll join me again whenever and if ever I do another reading journal update. Thanks so much for being here, and I'll see you in the next one.